Welcome back, Rotary Nerds. Glad you guys could stop by, check out the shop, see what we got going on, and getting ready for Sickweek. Lots to be had. As you can see behind me, we pulled the motor out, or I should say I pulled the motor out. I wanted to be able to make sure and go through the engine just to double check seals, springs, stuff like that. There's no sense on going to an event like this and bringing a used engine, especially when I have the time to be able to at least go through it, inspect it, make sure everything's good inside, and slap some new springs or seals for the rotors in there and be as tip-top as we possibly can be. I went through on everything that I have for the turbo system, all that kind of stuff. I'm still gonna go through and just pressure test the, and sorry, I got just a ton of stuff packed in here. It's been absolutely frigid outside. We've gotten tons of snow up in Minnesota, so I had to bring all the toys out to be able to play out in the snow. That's in the garage, obviously, but with the turbo, I went through, double checked everything. We're good there. Turbo's working mint. No issues with the bearings or anything. I'm going to go through and just pressure test the liquid air intercooler. Just make sure that there's no cracks, visually inspect everything. I didn't see anything for it cracking. One thing I did notice on the exhaust manifold, on the flange, on the inside, on either the front or the rear runner, it did have a little bit of exhaust leak, so I'm going to bring that back to my belt sander just to make sure that my surface is nice and flush. No leaks there. Maybe and throw a little RTV gray, or I'm sorry, some copper RTV on those exhaust gaskets. Had to go through a couple of my titanium studs that I used for the engine, basically clamp force for the engine holding this together. A couple of the nuts that went on here were actually kind of stuck on, so I'm not sure if some just got gummed up in the threads or whatnot, so I had to rechase the threads on those, just make sure that they're good. Everything threads on normal now, no issues. Just kind of visually inspect everything, right? Even the clutch, make sure the clutch is good. It's only got about 8 or 9 passes on it. All the splines look good. It's not gulling like how it did before. Borrowing some tires, some really nice Avid ones from my boy Mike Bose. So these are off his RX-7, which looks sweet and killer. So he's letting me, he's actually the co-pilot. He's letting me use his for the street driving portion of Sickweek. So that's pretty sweet that he's gonna be able to do that. Or let me borrow those. And then just kind of cleaning up in the engine bay, just getting everything dialed in, figure out if there's anything, you know, rubbing, wires melting, things like that. Just visual inspections. Exhaust came back, so the exhaust, we got some heat shield on here. Had to have, I don't know if you can see in here, some standoffs welded on just so that I could have some heat shielding on the exhaust away from the actual transmission. And then I had a little dump tube out the side for the exhaust on the muffler, just so it doesn't echo off the back of everything there. So we can get into the engine and the stuff that I saw. Not a whole lot, actually. For how many passes, how long I've had this engine. This motor is from like 2000 and I want to say like 2013, 2014 is when I bought it. And it was used. It was a JDM block. I just basically tore it down, did a bridge port to it, and then stacked her together. And I've just been basically opening it every so often, every couple of years, just to make sure, visually inspect everything. So yeah, on the rotors, the only thing that I had to change on these guys is there's springs behind all of the seals that basically seal your combustion on the faces. And behind the corner seals, I replaced those springs. You have your side seals here. I replaced those springs. The apex seal springs, I haven't replaced them yet because the apex seals aren't in. I did get new 3-piece apex seals since my other 3-piece apex seals have been in there for probably almost close to 3 seasons. No sense on starting off this season with used seals. Yeah, could I run them? Yes. Is it a good idea? Probably wouldn't matter, but I'm going to do it anyways. I got the time, might as well throw them in there. So I contacted Edgar at E&J. He sent me off another set of 3-piece seals. And then on the oil control rings, these are metal oil control rings with a spring behind it, and then a silicone inner O-ring, and then a Viton outer O-ring. all that stuff is the same. I didn't have to change any of that. As you can see, there's like no blow-by on this engine whatsoever. There's no oil seeping past these where it's smoking or making a lot of carbon on the rotors themselves. So no reason to touch that stuff unless they are damaged. But yeah, so the rotor bearings look good. Oop, didn't mean to pop that seal out there. We'll pop that guy back in. But yeah, so I have my rear rotor. I don't know if you can see that. I always mark them rear, front. It's upside down, but it's there because these springs are actually directional. So, or the oil control rings are directional. So you don't want to mix up your rotors for front and rear when you have them assembled. Otherwise, that inner oil control ring, I'll go off this side, that inner oil control ring will spin inside there. There's a lock keeper on the spring to hold these in position. Visually inspected the block itself. Everything in here looks good. So if we just kind of take a peek, it's just the standard. I did a Bridgeport myself. Nothing crazy, nothing fancy. It's just normal Bridgeport. Just cleaned up everything. I'll have to go through one more time with a nice rag, some solvent cleaner, get all that stuff cleaned up, all the surfaces. But yeah, everything kind of wiped off. Nothing crazy, no wear that was uncommon or weird. All the rotor housings, everything looks good on these. No issues there. So, and then my sleeves, I have to retighten these. They came loose again. I do have the sleeves gone. It just has the metal fire ring on the outside. The inner sleeve is cut out because that's what the rear rotor basically it folded over and shut this exhaust port off on Rocky Mountain Race Week. So I got rid of those, but these are still a little rattly. So I have set screws on the sides, on both sides, holding those in. I didn't DEFCON them before when I put these in, so I'm probably gonna try to tighten these as much as possible. Put some epoxy or some DEFCON in there, just to epoxy those screws from backing out or moving, because they're a little bit they aren't flush. So I don't know, you can't really see that, but there you go. But yeah, so when they back out, they have enough room in here to back out because they're not flush with the actual rotor housing themselves. But otherwise, all the bearings look good, everything there. The only thing that I have to do is that my upper intake gasket I have new. I do have to port match my intake gasket for the lower, just a port match for the runners. So I'll do that here, as well as my front cover gasket. And then I just have a closing kit, gasket kit. Just basically your O-rings, tension bolt washer O-rings, dowel pin O-rings, and then your water jackets for the coolant and oil. So pretty straightforward rebuild. I mean, I feel like everything maybe cost me, it was like $600 to be able to go through that engine. So for that, it's a steal of a deal. If you're able to reuse all your parts and nothing's extremely damaged, it's really not that expensive to do a rotary engine, rebuild a rotary engine, kind of like your regular piston engine. If you don't need to replace the pistons and rods and everything else, and all you're doing is basically cylinder rings and some head gaskets, that's about what I'm doing with my rotary engine. Same concept, nothing really different there. Reusing everything. But yeah, so I'll get to getting this guy put together. You guys can enjoy and come with me as I basically stack this motor back together, and we'll drop it in the car and do our startup. So hopefully you guys stick around for the remaining video. Should be another 5-10 minutes of some rotary action. All right, well, following tradition, I figured might as well build the engine on a bucket, since this motor that's been in this car, I don't think it's ever been built on an engine stand. Why ruin a good streak here? And it's good practice, because on Sickweek, if anything were to happen, I'd be building it on a bucket. So don't want to go spoiling myself. But yeah, we'll get some RTV on these. This is where the dowel pin goes for your oil galley for the corner. Just get our corner legs on the motor. Make my 4. Spread it around a little bit. Yeah, these are going to go back together pretty quick. So this will hopefully stack probably within about 15 minutes or so. And then tightening everything and getting everything torqued down, that probably takes the longest once the motor's stacked. All in all, this is only like a 45-minute build process. Once you've done it this many times, it goes back together pretty quick. So yeah, I think that everything here, for how it looked, should go very smooth. Very happy with it. We'll figure out, I think that I want to make this guy my front rotor housing. Is this even the front? Actually, yeah, it's even stamped. I don't know what that's stamped. It's either stamped front F or R, one of the two. So everything's good here. Looking good. Throw a little oil in this guy. Grab my front rotor. Now I did off camera glue all of my corner pieces of my apex seal down in place, because it's got 2 corner seals per apex seal instead of 1 corner seal per apex seal, corner piece I should say. So all those are already glued into place, and I assemble my rotors with the apex seals already in. So with that being said, a lot of people, like, they'll put them in after the fact. Like these ones, I already have the apex seal springs and the apex seals already in the rotor. Just compress it, drop it into place, and then I just know that the apex seal springs, the corner seal springs, everything that gives my apex seal compression is already in place. Nothing's gonna move around on me. So that's kind of the way that I've done it with 3-piece apex seals. Now I could leave the corner tips out, press in the corner or the apex seal springs, or put in the corner piece afterwards. But since I'm already gluing one piece of the corner piece of the apex seal, might as well glue the second piece as well, and then it makes the apex seal all one. But I already did that, and they're already in the rotors, so I'm not going to take them out to show, but that's all I do. So now I'll put the eccentric shaft in partially, get that somewhat set up, and then glue or RTV all my corners again, stack the center on, and we'll go from there. But yeah, everything looks good to go. So with the eccentric shaft, I'm really not going to put this in all the way because I don't have anybody to hold it or to prop it up when I drop the center cast iron on, because you have to actually guide it around each other. And I have a front bearing support on, so it can only go in literally one way, and it will fall right into place. So I got to be really careful with that. Keep that there. And now we'll RTV the corners. And I don't use a ton of RTV on these. I do use a ton of RTV when we talk about the oil pan. I'll put a ton of RTV on that guy because I hate oil pan leaks. But this stuff, generally, there's really not any pressure. The oil really doesn't get up past the level of the bottom of the motor. It goes up a little bit past full on dipstick is generally where I run the car. So I definitely want to get it where I have some extra RTV coverage, but not just a ton of RTV where when I clamp this down, it's going to go out RTV into the oil pan area. Sometimes if you get a loose straggler that breaks off, I mean, that's just begging to clog up your oil pickup tube, just the screen that's there. Nobody needs that. So go a little bit light on the RTV on the actual in between the housings, rotor housings and cast irons, but I'll go heavy on the actual oil pan. Some may even say that that's not needed, but I've had plenty of leaky oil pans in my day, so try to get those covered as much as possible. Everything looks good there. Alright, so now drop the center on here. Looks pretty good. Hold my breath just right, get this guy in place. Nothing comes out with my water jacket. I just want to make sure that nothing rolls in your water jackets or any of that kind of stuff. Everything looks good. Nice. All right. Basically, repeat steps 1 through 3. Whether it be a race engine, a street engine for longevity, a restoration you're doing, this is all the same stuff pretty much for a rotary engine. Everybody basically uses RTV, some type of a gasket dressing or Vaseline on the water jackets. It's all your flavor for that. Obviously you just want to use stuff that you trust and that you know is not going to leak on you. A lot of stuff that I use, like, that's Ford RTV. Nobody ever actually even knew what RTV meant. Whenever I asked them, you know, what's RTV mean? What's it stand for? Nobody could ever tell me, except one person actually told me what RTV was. And I'm sure he's going to watch this video, so for him, I'm going to tell you, room temperature vulcanization. And if I'm wrong on pronouncing that or how I say it, I'm sure that he's going to be the one that corrects me. He's the one that told me that. Yeah, this is just your standard, you know, 1,000 horsepower bucket engine, not a crate engine, bucket engine. So yeah, everything looks good there. I just like to throw a little bit of oil in here, you know, might as well have a little bit of oil. Make sure everything's not starting dry. Nobody likes dry starts. Alright, rear rotor time. Everything looks good. Throw this baby on. Personally, I mean, I don't know why people don't just leave the apex seals in. I feel so much more confident when you have the apex seals already in with the springs. Just like dropping that in there is just like boom. Just screams confidence. Oh, also, with my apex seals, generally what I do is I soak them in my two-stroke oil prior to installing them. So before I even put them in, I'll basically just seal them up with like, I use clots, 2-cycle race oil, and I'll just soak them in clots prior to even installing them into the rotor, just to basically completely cover them in an oil, lubrication. And the apexes I use are E&J, and E&J seals, they're kind of porous where it almost like absorbs the oil into it. So it seems like it works out fairly well. Installing them, they never are dry. So yes, I clean them prior to soaking them in oil, but makes them where the porous really absorbs that oil into them, and seem to like it. Even without running a filter most of the time, never, on the drag strip, I'm never running an oil filter, but it seems like the housings don't really have any crazy wear considering how I drive it, and I don't use the best filters. Whatever, I think the filter that I have on there is like some stainless steel mesh filter. It's a pretty decent micron to it, for filtration, but at least it's not like one of those squirrel catcher type filters, mesh filters. It's an actual filter. So yeah, now we're on to our last housing. Cast iron, I should say. Just the rear cast iron, and she's sealed up. It's that easy. And that's it. Alright, so I'm going to throw the tension bolts in, run through the torque. I'll just throw that on time lapse because that definitely just takes a little while to do, but that is a rotary race engine stacked up for you guys. Alright, motor's all back together, so everything's torqued down, good to go. Just wanted to flip her back over. I always like to at least go through just a spin over, make sure everything's got good compression. Nothing sounds like it's bound up or anything like that. So I just put the front pulley bolt back in, main pulley bolt, and then just crank her over. I have the spark. Well, the spark plugs are in, so it's going to be a little bit hard to crank over. It's not going to be so free, so it's going to definitely build compression, so I might have to hold this a little bit. No, nothing's binding. Oh, she's got compression though. Seems good. Everything's nice and lubricated on the inside. And it doesn't have to be crazy. I'm not going to store this engine for any lengthy period of time. That's why I didn't do like some type of, Vaseline for the rotors, or like an assembly, real type of assembly lube for like longevity for storing. I just use regular motor oil that I run in the car, and then just some pre-mix fluid, just because I know that I'm going to be running this engine within the next week. So, with that being said, everything seems good. So we will put the front cover back on, get all that jazz done, and then this motor's going back in the car. So I won't bore with you guys with putting the front cover and like the oil pump assembly on. If you've seen one rotary go together, you've seen them all. I'm not going to be that guy going through every step by step, but that's basically the block. Nothing really to it there. Great compression. She's back in action, freshened up, ready for Sickweek. Well, that's going to do it for today's video, guys. We got the motor put back together. Only need the front cover and the oil pan on this guy. Otherwise, all this can go back on it once the motor's back in the car. We're still waiting on injectors. Unfortunately, those haven't arrived yet. So as soon as those do, we will have a startup video, hopefully within this week. We only got 30 days left till Sickweek. We're crossing things off the list left and right. I really feel confident that we're going to be able to bring a competitive car in the stick shift class. We may not be the fastest, but we'll be the loudest, right? So definitely we're going to have that going for us. Appreciate you guys for watching. Remember, like, subscribe, comment below, share with your friends, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks.